Australia is a federation of 6 states, together with 10 federal territories. The Australian mainland consists of 5 of the 6 federated states. The state of Tasmania is an island in close proximity to the mainland, and 3 of the federal territories, aside from the Australian Antarctic Territory, which is Australia's claim to part of Antarctica. Australia is the world's 6th largest country by total area. The 3 mainland territories are classified for some purposes as internal territories, the others as external territories. All states and the 2 largest internal territories are partially self-governing, as well as being represented in the federal parliament. The other territories are administered by the federal government. Since 2015, federal control has also been extended to the formerly self-governing territory of Norfolk Island. 3 of the external territories are inhabited, the others are uninhabited, apart from non-permanent scientists. Geographic Australia. The term Geographic Australia is used by the Australian government to describe the area covered by demographic statistics such as national population figures. This area comprises Christmas Island and the Cocos Islands in addition to the 6 states and 3 mainland territories. Norfolk Island is the only territory with a native population that is not part of Geographic Australia. Background and overview. The states originated as separate British colonies prior to federation in 1901. The colony of New South Wales was founded in 1788 and originally comprised much of the Australian mainland, as well as Lord Howe Island, New Zealand, Norfolk Island, and Van Diemen's Land, in addition to the area currently referred to as the state of New South Wales. During the 19th century, large areas were successively separated to form the colony of Tasmania, the colony of Western Australia, the province of South Australia, the colony of New Zealand, the Victoria colony and the colony of Queensland. Upon federation, the 6 colonies of New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, and Tasmania became the founding states of the new Commonwealth of Australia. Legislative powers of the states are protected by the Australian Constitution, Section 107, and under the principle of federalism, Commonwealth legislation only applies to the states where permitted by the Constitution. The territories, by contrast, are from a constitutional perspective directly subject to the Commonwealth government. The Australian Parliament has power to legislate in the territories that it does not possess in the states. Constitution Section 122. Most of the territories are directly administered by the Commonwealth government, while 2 have some degree of self-government, although less than that of the states. In the self-governing territories, the Australian Parliament retains the full power to legislate, and can override laws made by the territorial institutions, which it has done on rare occasions, for the purposes of Australian intergovernmental bodies. The Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory are treated as if they were states. Each state has a governor appointed by the Queen, which by convention she does on the advice of the state premier. The administrator of the Northern Territory, by contrast, is appointed by the Governor-General. The Australian Capital Territory has neither a governor nor an administrator, but the Governor-General exercises some powers that in other jurisdictions are exercised by the governor of a state or administrator of a territory, such as the power to dissolve the Legislative Assembly. Jervis Bay Territory is the only non-self-governing internal territory. Until 1989, it was administered as if it were a part of the Act, although it has always been a separate territory. Under the terms of the Jervis Bay Territory Acceptance Act, the laws of the Act apply to the Jervis Bay Territory insofar as they are applicable and providing they are not inconsistent with an ordinance. Although residents of the Jervis Bay Territory are generally subject to laws made by the ACT Legislative Assembly. They are not represented in the Assembly. They are represented in the Parliament of Australia as part of the electoral division of Fraser in the ACT and by the ACT's 2 senators. In other respects, the territory is administered directly by the federal government through the Territories portfolio. The external territory of Norfolk Island possessed a degree of self-government from 1979 until 2015. Each state has a bicameral parliament except Queensland, which abolished its upper house in 1922. The lower house is called the Legislative Assembly, except in South Australia and Tasmania, where it is called the House of Assembly. Tasmania is the only state to use proportional representation for elections to its lower house. All others elect members from single-member constituencies, using preferential voting. The upper house is called the Legislative Council and is generally elected from multi-member constituencies using proportional representation. The 3 self-governing territories, the ACT, the Northern Territory, and Norfolk Island, each have unicameral legislative assemblies. The head of government of each state is called the Premier, appointed by the state's governor. In normal circumstances, the governor will appoint as Premier whoever leads the party or coalition which exercises control of the lower house of the state parliament. However, in times of constitutional crisis, the governor can appoint someone else as Premier. The head of government of the self-governing internal territories is called the Chief Minister. The Northern Territory's Chief Minister. In normal circumstances, whoever controls the Legislative Assembly is appointed by the administrator. Comparative terminology: governors and administrators of states and territories, premiers and chief ministers of states and territories, state and territorial parliaments, Parliament of New South Wales, Parliament of Queensland, Parliament of South Australia, Parliament of Tasmania, Parliament of Victoria, Parliament of Western Australia, Northern Territory Legislative Assembly, Australian Capital Territory Legislative Assembly, State and Territory Supreme Courts, Supreme Court of the Australian Capital Territory, Supreme Court of New South Wales, Supreme Court of the Northern Territory, Supreme Court of Queensland, Supreme Court of South Australia, Supreme Court of Tasmania, Supreme Court of Victoria, Supreme Court of Western Australia, Supreme Court of Norfolk Island, State and Territory Police Forces, Australian Capital Territory Police, New South Wales Police, Northern Territory Police, Queensland Police, South Australia Police, Tasmania Police, Victoria Police, Western Australia Police, State and Territory Borders, Australian Capital Territory Border, New South Wales Borders, Northern Territory Borders, Queensland Borders, South Australian Borders, Tasmanian Borders, Victorian Borders, Western Australian Border. Statistics: distance table, distance in kilometers from the corresponding city on the XY axis. State and territory codes.